A rhetorical analysis of Mr. Collins' proposal from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. In order to do this rhetorical analysis, we are going to examine Mr. Collins' use of ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, and logos, logic. The opening of Mr. Collins' proposal uses ethos, credibility. Mr. Collins starts off his proposal by mentioning that he has the approval of Elizabeth's mother, Mrs. Bennet. By starting off this way, he proves that Elizabeth's family has given him permission to propose, making him a great candidate for marriage. Mr. Collins then makes his proposal by listing 3 numerical reasons why Elizabeth should marry him. This approach uses logos. His first point is that since he is a minister, it would be the right thing for him to marry Elizabeth and set an example of matrimony for his parish. By claiming this reason, Mr. Collins makes the proposal seem like an obligation to him, which gives the impression that he does not actually want to marry Elizabeth. However, in claiming the marriage as the right thing, he attempts to use the sense of obligation to make Elizabeth say yes simply because she wants to make a good moral decision, not because she actually wants to marry him. Mr. Collins' second point uses pathos, an emotional appeal. Mr. Collins' second point is that he believes marrying Elizabeth will make him happier. This claim does not express love at all. He does not give an impassioned speech about how much he loves Elizabeth or how happy she makes him, but rather briefly states that he thinks she would make him happier, and then moves on. Since this is the only semi-emotional claim Mr. Collins makes during his proposal fails to properly express pathos, a necessary component of a marriage proposal. The third point of the proposal uses logos again. Mr. Collins' third point is that his patroness, Lady Catherine, recommended that he get married to a gentlewoman. This claim is logical, as Elizabeth does meet all the requirements that Lady Catherine has set, so it would make sense for her to marry Mr. Collins. However, once again, Mr. Collins makes his proposal seem like a purely practical way to fulfill his marital obligations. This claim is not personal and could describe a multitude of women. Mr. Collins then goes on to explain to Elizabeth why he chose to propose to her over a suitable woman from his own neighborhood. Mr. Collins explains that he is set to inherit the estate of Elizabeth's father, Mr. Bennet, when he dies. Due to this, Mr. Collins feels that he should marry one of Mr. Bennet's daughters, so that when their father dies, at least one of the daughters will continue to live at his house and possibly be less sad about his death. This claim makes his proposal seem more like an arranged marriage, an obligation, than a marriage of love. However, his reasoning on the inheritance does give him more credibility, because if Mr. Collins is inheriting Mr. Bennet's estate, then he must be in good standings with the family. So he seems like a good, trustworthy candidate for marriage. So, overall, does Mr. Collins' proposal make a good rhetorical argument? Let's examine each aspect. First, logos. He uses a lot of sound logic and evidence for why he and Elizabeth should marry. Second, ethos. He establishes his validity as a prospective husband for Elizabeth with family approval and inheritance. Third, pathos. Mr. Collins lacks the appropriate amount of emotion for a marriage proposal. While he gives many good reasons why a marriage would make sense, he gives no indication as to whether it would feel right. In conclusion, Mr. Collins' proposal falls flat because it fails to provide all 3 pieces necessary for a strong rhetorical argument. Without pathos, the proposal seems like a business agreement, making the marriage seem rather undesirable. The failure of Mr. Collins' proposal is evident in the fact that Elizabeth repeatedly rejects it. And her rejection is backed by this analysis, because honestly, she deserved better than his apathetic proposal.